What if a local business offered to discount your bar tab just to publicly shred a photograph of your ex? Modern culture has successfully commodified this kind of disdain, transforming our natural flashes of heartbreak into a highly profitable, curated lifestyle brand. It is a calculated engineering problem designed to monetize your misery. In today's episode of The Sidebar, we are looking at two essays by artist and polymath Jeremy Brunansky. He addresses this phenomenon from the perspective of naturalism. This framework demands that we opt out of the traps and drop the performance of bitterness. By the end of today's episode, you'll be able to reframe daily relationship frictions as a beautiful, unmanufactured texture of real human connection. Grab your coffee, tea, or wine. It's time for The Sidebar.
I want you to just picture the exact moment you woke up this morning.
Oh, boy.
Right. You open your eyes, you reach over to your nightstand, you grab your phone, and the second that screen illuminates, you're implicitly stepping onto a battlefield.
Yeah, you really are. You didn't ask to be enlisted, but there you are.
Exactly. I mean, before you've even had a cup of coffee, you're just bombarded by this world that absolutely demands you pick a side.
Right, you open an app and immediately you see a post from like an old friend taking this hardline stance on some political issue.
And they're essentially saying, if you don't agree with them, you're a monster.
Yep. Or you see an advertisement telling you that you should be furious about something. Yeah. Or a news alert that frames half the country as this existential threat to the other half.
It's just this constant suffocating friction. Like the unspoken rule of modern society seems to be that you are required to participate in it.
That if you aren't angry, you just aren't paying attention.
Right. But the reality is, it's just exhausting. I mean, it drains the color out of everything.
It really is the normalization of outrage as a baseline state of being.
Yeah.
Like we've been conditioned to view our anger not as a fleeting emotional response to a specific injustice, but as well as a lifestyle brand.
Oh, lifestyle brand. Why?
We kind of wear our disdain like a badge of honor, like it's proof of our intellectual or moral engagement with the world around us.
It is so draining. So today we're going to explore a completely different framework. We're going to look at what happens when you actively choose to opt out of that friction.
And just to be clear, we're not talking about burying your head in the sand or ignoring the real world.
No, not at all. We're talking about a highly intentional philosophical framework for identifying what we're going to call manufactured division and totally rejecting it.
Reclaiming your peace of mind.
Exactly. So for this deep dive, we are jumping into a portfolio of work by a writer, creator, and technologist named Jeremy Brunansky.
We've got a few really interesting sources today.
We do. We have his background reference guide, which is fascinating on its own, alongside two very distinct essays he published a few years apart.
One is a Valentine's Day piece titled Romance, Past, Present, and Future.
And the other is this deeply analytical societal breakdown called The Devil, the media, the mobs.
Right, and at first glance, those two pieces of writing sound completely unrelated.
Totally. I mean, one is a reflection on ex-girlfriends and dating quirks, and the other is a pretty intense structural analysis of how the media and political entities operate.
But the brilliance of this collection, the reason we're looking at them together, is that they are both built on the exact same foundational philosophy.
Yeah, they're basically diagnosing the same disease. One is just looking at it through the microscope of a single romantic relationship, and the other is looking at it through the telescope of national politics.
It's a really unique way to look at human behavior.
It is. And I want to frame this for everyone listening before we really get into the weeds here. Think of your peace of mind, like your baseline level of happiness, as a walled garden.
A walled garden. I like that.
Yeah, you cultivate it, you protect it, you decide what grows there. And what Brunansky is writing about is this realization that we are constantly letting outside forces, whether it's, the lingering memory of an ex from 10 years ago, or a cable news pundit screaming on your screen.
We let them just back up a dump truck and throw their toxic trash right over our wall.
Exactly. So today we are looking at the specific actionable tools you can use to build that wall higher, to stop letting other people monetize your misery.
And to understand those tools, we really have to start by looking at the architect himself. Because Brunansky's background is, it's the key that unlocks his entire philosophy.
It really is.
He doesn't look at the world the way a traditional self-help author does, or like a political pundit. He's coming at this from an incredibly unusual, hybrid perspective.
Unusual is putting it mildly. I mean, when I was reading his portfolio reference guide, I honestly didn't know what to make of him at first.
It's quite a resume.
Let me lay this out for you, and you tell me how these pieces fit together.
Okay.
Because on one hand, you have a guy with a 40-year tenure in the performing arts.
Right.
We are talking about someone who started acting, singing, dancing, and playing classical piano at, like, the age of 5. He went to college as a music major with a vocal performance emphasis. He studied at a conservatory for the recording arts.
He's a filmmaker, a writer, a director.
Yeah, and he lists his core influences as Walt Disney, Federico Fellini, Charlie Chaplin, Frank Sinatra, and the Beatles. So, okay, we have this deeply emotional, creative, whimsical artist who understands sweeping narratives and the romance of life.
A classic romantic in the artistic sense of the word. A storyteller who understands human emotion on a very visceral level.
Right. But then you turn the page on his resume.
And it takes a hard left turn.
It really does. He is also a certified Google AI professional. He specializes in AI digital marketing and revenue operations. He has over 2 decades of experience as a frontline corporate leader, managing these complex cross-functional teams and massive departments.
And his literary influences in that space. He's not just reading poetry.
No, he's studying Machiavelli. He's reading Milton Friedman, the staunch free market economist. He's analyzing historical grand strategy from people like John Lewis Gaddis alongside ancient philosophy like Lao Tzu.
Oh, and don't forget, he also has a massive affinity for comic books. Batman, the Silver Surfer, Doctor Strange.
It reads like a contradiction, doesn't it?
It completely does.
It reads like 3 different people accidentally got their resumes stapled together. I mean, I have to push back here. How does a guy who loves the whimsical fantasy of Walt Disney and, you know, the emotional depth of a classical piano sonata, how does he simultaneously obsess over Milton Friedman's economic theories and Google AI algorithms?
It seems scattered at first glance.
Yeah. Is he a Renaissance man, or is this just the scattered intellect trying to be everything at once?
Well, it's absolutely a synthesis, and it's the exact reason his insights are so penetrating. I mean, let's break down what revenue operations and AI marketing actually require from a person.
Yeah.
In those fields, you have to be a systems thinker. Your entire job is to look at massive, chaotic sets of data sales numbers, marketing clicks, customer behavior, and identify the underlying machinery.
You're looking for the patterns.
You are looking for the algorithm. You have to figure out how input A directly causes output B. You are searching for points of friction in a system and figuring out how to eliminate them so the system runs smoothly.
Okay, so he's an engineer of human systems in the corporate world.
Precisely. Now, take that cold, analytical, systems thinking machinery and apply it to the mind of a classical artist who deeply understands human longing, storytelling, and philosophy.
Oh, wow.
Like when he looks at society or when he looks at a romantic relationship, he doesn't just see the messy emotions. He sees the code.
He sees the schematic.
Exactly. He understands how an emotional narrative is being mechanically constructed to elicit a specific response. He can look at a political mob or a bitter breakup and say, I see the algorithm running beneath the surface here. I see the input that is designed to create this output of anger.
That is a wildly powerful lens. He's reverse engineering human interaction.
It really is.
It's like he's looking at the matrix, but instead of green falling code, he's seeing the invisible threads of emotion and manipulation.
That's a great way to put it.
And this is an awesome moment for you, the listener, to just pause and reflect on your own brain box, as we might call it. We all have these bizarre combinations of past lives, right?
So, yeah.
Maybe you were a bartender who is now an accountant. Maybe you're a nurse who obsesses over fantasy football. How do those completely different sets of rules and environments inform the way you process a fight with your spouse or, you know, a frustrating day at work? Our unique lenses shape the way we guard our walled gardens.
And Brunansky uses his very specific lens to zero in on the most intimate system any of us ever participate in.
Romantic relationships.
Yes. This is where we start to see his philosophy in action at the micro level. Let's look at that first essay, the one published on Valentine's Day in 2021, titled Romance, Past, Present, and Future.
I love this piece because it starts with a personal anecdote that instantly establishes his rebellious streak.
He's not a fan of the traditional holiday.
Not at all. He reveals that for pretty much his entire adult life, he has opted out of Valentine's Day. He views it as a completely manufactured holiday designed to force a specific monetized expression of love.
But he doesn't just ignore the day, which is the interesting part.
Right, he replaces it. Because February 14th also happens to be the day the state of Arizona was founded, he gives his partners flowers to celebrate Arizona's birthday.
It's wonderfully subversive. He's essentially telling his partners, I'm going to express my affection for you, but I refuse to do it on the exact terms dictated by a greeting card company.
It's a playful but firm rejection of manufactured behavior.
Yeah, and it sets the stage perfectly for the inciting incident of the essay.
Which is wild. He's scrolling through social media around Valentine's Day, and he sees a promotion for a local business, presumably a bar. And the promotion is this. Bring in a photograph of your ex-partner, physically shredded at the bar, and we will give you a discount on your drinks.
The Shred and X event?
Yeah.
These events have become incredibly popular over the last decade. I mean, it's the monetization of the anti-Valentine sentiment.
Definitely.
It caters to the cultural idea that the proper way to move on from a failed relationship is to performatively destroy the memory of the other person.
But Bernansky's reaction to seeing this advertisement is not amusement. It's genuine, profound confusion.
He just doesn't get it.
He looks at this promotion through his systems thinking lens, and he just cannot compute the amount of sustained disdain and bitterness that would be required for a person to actually, leave their house, print out a photo of someone they once loved, drive to a bar, and shred it in front of strangers just to save $3 on a beer.
He finds the emotional math completely irrational. To understand why he finds it so bizarre, he actually audits his own romantic history in the essay.
Oh, the hierarchy.
Yes, he does it in this very methodical, hierarchical way that perfectly illustrates his analytical mind.
He literally categorizes his past. He writes that he has been friends with more women than he's fooled around with. He's fooled around with more than he's slept with. He slept with more than he's dated. He's dated more than have actually been his girlfriend.
It's very systematic.
Very. And then he points out that the final tiers of this system, fiancés and wives, sit at a firm 0. He's unmarried.
Right.
But despite navigating all of those messy transitions, the blurred lines between friends and lovers, the inevitable breakups and the pain that comes with them, he realizes something striking. He completely lacks a crazy ex-horror story.
He notes that all the women he's dated have been, in his words, pretty legit ladies. He even maintains contact with several of them who have gone on to get married or start new relationships.
The baseline of mutual respect remained intact even after the romantic utility of the relationship ended.
Exactly. So he asks himself a crucial question in the text. Is he just lucky? Is he blessed? Is he just a phenomenally good judge of character who magically avoided toxic people?
But before we get to his answer, I really need to stop and challenge this entire premise, because I know exactly what a lot of people listening are thinking right now.
What's the pushback here?
The pushback is that sometimes shredding the photo is exactly what you need to do.
Okay, lay it out.
I mean, we live in an era that heavily prioritizes mental health, establishing boundaries, and cutting toxic people out of our lives. If someone was manipulated, lied to, or betrayed by an ex, isn't anger the healthy response?
That's a fair question.
Isn't venting, going to a bar with your friends, and tearing up a photo of the guy who broke your heart a necessary cathartic step in the healing process? By telling people they shouldn't do that, isn't he just advocating for suppressing negative emotions?
That is the exact counter-argument modern culture would make. We have elevated catharsis through anger to the level of psychological dogma.
Right.
But you have to look closely at what Brunansky is actually diagnosing here. He is not saying that breakups don't hurt. He is not saying you shouldn't feel grief or betrayal or anger in the immediate aftermath of a deeply hurtful event.
So what's the line he's drawing?
The line he is drawing is not about the feeling of pain, it is about the commodification and celebration of disdain.
The commodification of disdain. Let's dig into how that actually works mechanically.
Think about the physical act of the Shred and X promotion. You are taking an incredibly complex, private human experience, a relationship that contained joy, vulnerability, inside jokes, and eventual heartbreak.
And a whole shared life.
And you are flattening it.
Yeah.
You are reducing that entire human being to a two-dimensional villain.
Why?
Because a business figured out they can increase their foot traffic on a Tuesday night by gamifying your resentment.
Wow. When you put it that way, it sounds incredibly manipulative. The bar doesn't care about your healing. They care about their profit margin.
Exactly. They are manufacturing an environment where bitterness is rewarded. And Bernansky's systems thinking mind recoils at this because it is highly inefficient for your soul.
Inefficient how?
Well, to maintain the narrative that your ex is a monster worthy of public shredding requires a constant active expenditure of negative emotional energy. You have to continually water the weeds of your own resentment.
You have to keep the anger alive on purpose.
Right. And by participating in that, you are letting external forces dictate the emotional temperature of your internal life. You are letting a bartender throw trash into your walled garden.
So the alternative he is suggesting isn't to pretend the bad things didn't happen. The alternative is to simply refuse to be a puppet for someone else's marketing campaign.
Precisely.
It's choosing to say, this relationship ended, maybe it ended terribly, but I am not going to let the culture goad me into performing hatred for a discount.
He argues for an active, rebellious gratitude. It's the choice to remember that at one point this person brought you joy, to remember the good parts, take the lessons learned from the bad parts, and then close the book with grace.
Because holding on to the disdain only poisons you, not them.
Exactly.
This is such a profound shift in perspective. If you are listening right now, take a mental inventory. Think about a relationship or even a deep friendship that ended badly. How much of your daily mental bandwidth are you still spending actively maintaining the narrative that they are the villain and you are the victim?
It takes up a lot of space.
It really does. Does revisiting that anger actually serve you, or is it just a comfortable, culturally approved habit? What would actually happen to your physical stress levels, your blood pressure, if you just decided to let the bitterness drop?
What if you chose to look back and simply say, thank you for the time we shared, and then moved on?
It's incredibly difficult to do. It requires immense emotional discipline, which is why Bernansky provides a very grounded, almost humorous framework for how to practice this kind of acceptance in the day-to-day reality of a relationship.
Right, because it's easy to say be grateful from a distance.
Yeah.
It's much harder when you're actually living with someone's daily habits.
Oh, absolutely. Which brings us to my absolute favorite part of the essay. We have to talk about the scented candle theory.
The scented candles.
Yes. This is where he moves from abstract philosophy to the gritty, annoying reality of sharing space with another human being.
He sets up the premise by acknowledging that relationships are work, and while they create beautiful memories, they also create moments of intense, absurd frustration.
And he gives the most vividly specific example. He talks about dating a woman who constantly buys scented candles as decorations but refuses to ever actually light them.
It's hilarious.
He writes, they're for decoration. No, they're candles. Light them and let's make this place smell like cinnamon and vanilla. Please stop buying stuff you have no intention of actually using.
It is such a brilliantly mundane detail.
But it captures the universal experience of partnership so perfectly. We all have a scented candle equivalent.
Oh, everyone does.
Maybe your partner leaves the kitchen cabinets open. Maybe they squeeze the toothpaste from the middle. Maybe they refuse to use their turn signal until the exact moment they are turning.
These are the microfictions that can slowly build up into massive resentment if you don't process them correctly.
Because in the moment, that unlit candle feels like a profound disrespect of your logic. It feels like an intentional slight.
But notice how Bernansky reframes the annoyance. How does he process that friction through his system's thinking lens?
He completely flips the script. He says that these tiny moments that drive you absolutely bonkers are not actually problems to be solved or eradicated.
Right.
They are the friction that allows you to truly know the texture of the person you are with. He writes that he wouldn't trade those frustrating memories for anything because looking back, they still make him smile. He calls them lessons of love.
It's a radical acceptance of the other person's fundamental weirdness. He poses a rhetorical question. Is an argument more valuable than connecting over a hobby she enjoys?
Probably not.
Exactly. He says, probably not, but sometimes you don't learn the lesson until after the test. He is acknowledging that we often fail in the moment we yell about the candles. But the ultimate takeaway shouldn't be bitterness.
The takeaway is an enriched understanding of this flawed human being you care about.
He's taking the bug and turning it into a feature.
I love that. And this micro-level acceptance is the foundation of his broader philosophy for romance, which he calls naturalism.
Naturalism is a crucial concept to define here. Within his framework, naturalism is the absolute rejection of gamesmanship.
Okay, explain that.
It's the absence of secret codes, manipulative testing, or trying to project a falsely perfected version of yourself just to win someone over.
Right. He specifically says there are no clever games required to get his attention. He advises people to just be themselves authentically and unapologetically.
And he backs this up with his own track record.
Yeah, he notes that almost all of his significant relationships began as long-term friendships. He mentions a relationship from 2015 that started after knowing the person for years.
And his last relationship, around 2016 to 2017, started off as just being movie friends and slowly evolved organically.
He believes that if you try to force a dynamic, if you try to mold yourself to fit what you think the other person wants, the system will eventually collapse.
Because a system built on false data cannot sustain itself.
Right.
If you input a fake version of your personality, the output, the relationship, will always be inherently unstable. Naturalism demands that you input the truth. As he says, they will always be enough if they are just themselves.
But I want to pause here and look at the vulnerability in his writing, because he makes a rather stunning admission for a guy writing an essay on how to do relationships correctly.
Yeah, he does.
He openly acknowledges that he has been completely single since 2017.
He playfully roasts his own theory.
He really does. He jokes that being single for several years running is not exactly the strongest statistical evidence that pro-naturalism is a foolproof strategy for finding a partner.
Self-awareness is key.
And again, my instinct as a reader is to say, well, if your system leaves you single for half a decade, maybe the system is broken. Maybe you need to play the game a little bit to find someone.
But that reaction fundamentally misunderstands his goal. If we look back at his reference guide, we see the profound influence of Stoic philosophy. People like Marcus Aurelius, Socrates.
How does that apply here?
Well, what does Stoicism teach? It teaches that the external world is completely out of your control. Right. You cannot control whether another person falls in love with you. You cannot force a perfect romantic outcome.
Okay.
The only thing you have absolute dictatorial control over is your own internal integrity and how you choose to present yourself to the world.
Ah, I see. So the goal of naturalism isn't necessarily securing a relationship. The goal is preserving your own authenticity.
Precisely. He is practicing romantic stoicism. He is saying, I am going to control what I can control. I will be honest, I will be grateful, I will not play games, and I will refuse to be bitter.
And whatever the universe outputs in response to that, even if the output is me remaining single, I will accept it because my walled garden remains perfectly intact.
Exactly. He is willing to be alone rather than be in a relationship built on forced behavior or manufactured drama.
That is incredibly empowering. He's taking all the power back from the chaos of the dating market. He's looking back at his entire romantic past, all the girls who didn't become wives, and instead of shredding their photos, he's essentially saying, thank you. We weren't a perfect fit, but the time we shared was ours, and that was enough.
It is the ultimate triumph of chosen gratitude over manufactured bitterness.
It really is.
And it is absolutely vital that the listener understands this micro-level dynamic. The choice to reject the shredding mentality in your private life, because we are about to scale this exact same mechanism up to a terrifying degree.
Right, because if holding on to disdain and performing anger can ruin the peace of a single individual, what happens when those exact same manipulative mechanics are deployed against an entire nation?
It gets much darker.
We are moving now from the intimate to the macro. We are looking at the essay he wrote a few months prior, in June of 2020, titled The Devil, the Media, the Mobs.
This piece is where his background in tech, AI, and corporate strategy truly takes the wheel. He is no longer analyzing a local bar promotion. He is analyzing the global infrastructure of communication.
He begins by outlining the great paradox of our modern technological age.
Right. He gives this incredibly succinct history of human connection.
He walks us through how the telephone and the radio were these massive civilization-altering steps forward because they allowed a voice to travel across the country.
Then television arrives, and it's a revelation. You aren't just hearing the voice, you are seeing the faces of people halfway across the world right in your living room.
And finally, the internet is born.
And he acknowledges the initial, beautiful, utopian promise of the internet. Suddenly, geographical boundaries vanished. A person in a small town in Ohio could see the daily life of someone in a village in Kenya.
It allowed humanity to manifest genuine visceral concern and empathy for strangers they would never physically meet.
It was supposed to be the ultimate engine for human unity.
But then Bernansky drops a massive, heavy question onto the page. He asks, but at what cost?
That question is the pivot point of his entire worldview. He is arguing that this magnificent machinery of empathy, the screens we hold in our hands, has been systematically hijacked.
The tools designed to connect us have been reverse engineered and weaponized into tools of forced division.
And this brings us to the most critical and honestly the most unsettling concept in this entire deep dive.
The dividing rod.
Yes. Bernansky introduces a framework he calls the dividing rod. Now, I want to unpack this analogy before we even look at his examples. What is a dividing rod, mechanically speaking?
Okay, let's think of a literal physical rod. In historical terms, a dividing rod or a wedge is a tool you drive into a solid object, like a piece of wood or a block of stone.
Right.
You strike it with a hammer, and the sheer force of the wedge creates a crack where none existed before. It forces a single unified thing to split into two opposing halves.
It doesn't find a natural break. It creates the break.
Exactly. And Bernansky theorizes that over the past 10 to 15 years, specific social, political, and cultural movements have been deliberately utilized by those in power, the media, political parties, algorithms, as psychological dividing rods.
They are driven into the population to create stark, hostile lines of division that simply did not exist previously.
Now, listener, I want to be extremely clear about what we are going to do next. The author uses several highly recognizable, often heavily politically charged movements as his case studies for this theory.
Yes, you need to be careful here.
Our job here today is not to debate the morality, the validity, or the righteousness of these specific movements. We are not taking a stance on the politics.
Definitely not.
What we are doing is looking exclusively at the social mechanics of how these movements were deployed in the media. We are analyzing the structural pattern of the dividing rod, regardless of the cause it's attached to.
We are looking at the algorithm of division impartially.
Okay, with that disclaimer in place, let's walk through the chronological examples he lays out. He traces this back to the Support the Troops movement during the Bush administration's conflicts in the Middle East.
He points to the Occupy Wall Street movement that began in 2011.
He lists the Black Lives Matter movement, noting its origins around 2013.
He mentions the Me Too movement from 2006 and the Time's Up movement in 2018.
These are drastically different movements spanning different decades and entirely different political ideologies.
But from a systems thinking perspective, Bernansky identifies a shared, identical methodology utilized by the media and political entities pushing them.
He calls it the binary trap, the absolute us or them mentality.
Yes.
So explain how that binary trap functions on a psychological level. How does the rod actually split the wood?
The mechanism relies on the total elimination of nuance. The dividing rod forces the populace into a purity test.
A purity test.
Right. The logic dictates, if you do not support Proposition X entirely, vocally, and without a single reservation, then you must automatically hate Group Y.
It removes any middle ground.
Exactly. It removes the ability to have a complex opinion.
Okay, let's see how that maps onto his examples.
Bernansky argues that during the Support the Troops era, the binary trap was deployed like this. If you offered any critique of the government's foreign policy or questioned the justification for the conflicts in the Middle East, you were immediately branded as someone who did not support the troops.
The dividing rod eliminated the space to say, I respect the soldiers, but I disagree with the war.
You had to choose a side, and by choosing a side, you were forced to resent the other.
And he applies that exact same structural analysis to Occupy Wall Street. He writes, it's one example of how if you're for one thing, then you're against another. The United States financial system was taken to the stage to divide Americans, create a new division among the people, and adjust the power balance.
The trap was, you are either purely for the working man on Main Street, or you are an elitist who loves big banks.
There is no room to discuss the complexities of a globalized economy.
It's the exact same blueprint applied to every movement he lists. If you are with us completely, you are against all of us who believe a certain way.
And the ultimate goal of the dividing rod is not just to make you disagree with your neighbor. The goal is to make you view your neighbor as a moral failure.
It's to engineer a profound, sustained resentment.
It reminds me of the way a slot machine works in a casino. A slot machine isn't designed to make you rich. It's designed to keep you pulling the lever.
Right, the intermittent rewards.
It uses flashing lights and intermittent rewards to hijack your dopamine system. What Bernansky is saying is that the media and these political mobs have built a sociological slot machine, but instead of taking your quarters, it runs on your outrage.
They keep flashing the US versus them binary on the screen to keep you pulling the lever of your own anger.
And just like a casino, the house always wins. The entities deploying the dividing rods gain ratings, they gain clicks, they gain campaign donations, and they gain consolidated power.
All while the citizenry is too busy fighting each other to notice who is operating the machine.
It is the Shred and X promotion, but on a terrifying national scale. Instead of a bartender handing you a photo of your ex to shred for a discount, it is a cable news anchor or a social media algorithm handing you a metaphorical photo of your neighbor or your coworker or your family member who votes differently.
And they are whispering in your ear, shred this person, trash their humanity, Call them evil.
Do it to prove you're on the right side of history. Do it to prove you belong to our group.
It is a dark, heavy realization. When you understand the mechanics of the dividing rod, you realize how much of your daily anxiety is entirely manufactured by external forces profiting off your stress.
It feels suffocating. If you are listening to this and feeling a sense of dread, I don't blame you. I mean, if we are constantly being targeted by these invisible societal dividing rods, how do we possibly escape the trap?
It seems impossible.
How do you defend your walled garden against a siege engine?
Well, this is where Brunansky's background in philosophy, history, and narrative art provides the antidote. He doesn't just diagnose the disease and leave us to suffer.
Thank goodness.
He provides a blueprint for reclaiming your agency, and he pulls his wisdom from some of the most fascinating, disparate sources imaginable.
This is where the synthesis of his brain box really pays off. Because when he looks for a weapon to fight back against the binary trap, he goes straight to modern pop culture mythology.
He quotes Star Wars.
He does. He points to Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi, who delivers the famous line, "Only a Sith deals in absolutes."
It might seem like a nerdy throwaway line, but culturally it's incredibly resonant.
How so?
In the Star Wars narrative, the Sith represent the dark side, the forces of authoritarian control, manipulation, and destruction. Dealing in absolutes, the concept of you are either completely with me or you are my enemy, is explicitly framed as the ideology of the villain.
Oh, I see.
By invoking this, Brunansky is telling the reader to trust their cultural intuition. The people demanding you pick a side and hate the other are utilizing the tactics of the dark side. They are not the heroes of the story.
But he doesn't just rely on sci-fi. He immediately pivots from a space opera to one of the most foundational historical and religious figures in human history.
He points to the life of Jesus.
And again, he approaches this not necessarily as a theological mandate, but as a profound historical archetype of human behavior.
Right. He highlights the fact that Jesus notoriously hung out with everyone across the social spectrum of his time.
He specifically points out that Jesus spent his time dining with a despised tax collector and maintained a close relationship with a former prostitute.
In the rigid, highly moralistic society of ancient Judea, those associations were scandalous. They were the ultimate failure of the purity test.
But Brunansky uses this to completely dismantle the modern concept of guilt by association. His argument is brilliant in its simplicity.
If this historical figure, who is universally recognized as the ultimate archetype of morality and grace, could sit down, share a meal, and maintain relationships with people deemed completely unacceptable by the mobs of his day,
then surely you and I can manage to stay friends with someone who just checked a different box on a ballot last November.
Exactly.
He is giving the listener a massive, vital gift in this section of the essay. He is explicitly giving the reader permission.
Permission.
He writes, "If you're the type of person who needs permission, I give you permission right now to believe whatever you want and still accept people with conflicting beliefs."
We cannot overstate how important that word is, permission.
Yeah.
For the last 10 years, the media, the algorithms, and the social mobs have been aggressively telling you that you do not have permission to cross the lines they've drawn.
They tell you it is a moral failing, a betrayal of your own side, to break bread with someone who disagrees with you on a hot-button issue.
Brunansky is stepping in as an authoritative voice, wielding history and philosophy to break that psychological spell. He is telling you the gate to your walled garden is open, and you are allowed to invite whoever you want inside.
And he leads by example, putting his own complex identity right on the table. He describes himself plainly. "I am a conservative white male who grew up in the arts."
Let's just look at that sentence. In the modern, algorithmically divided world, those identities, conservative, white male, lifelong artist, are constantly being shoved into opposing, hostile camps.
The dividing rods tell us those things shouldn't mix, but he embraces the totality of who he is.
He acknowledges his specific perspective, makes zero apologies for it, and then states unequivocally that he has plenty of friends whose lives, beliefs, and backgrounds vary greatly from his own.
He views the United States as the land of opportunity, and he makes a crucial addendum. It is not the land of opportunity for those of similar beliefs.
He recognizes that human beings are deeply, wonderfully complicated, and that the division being sold to us on our screens is artificially, criminally simple.
Which brings us to the title of the essay itself, The Devil, the Media, the Mobs. He opens the entire piece with a quote from Shakespeare's The Tempest.
Hell is empty and all the devils are here.
Let's decode that metaphor within his systems thinking framework. When he talks about the devil or demons throughout the text, he is not preaching a supernatural sermon. He is not talking about guys with pitchforks.
No, the devils are the mechanics of the system.
Exactly.
The devils are the media conglomerates, the outrage-driven algorithms, the political action committees, and the digital mobs. They are the entities that are deliberately pummeling our sensory inputs with irrationality, fear-mongering, and binary traps.
They are the forces that profit financially and politically from eroding the foundations of societal trust.
He writes that they seek to divide and create new power structures that erode the foundations of American society.
So when he ends the essay by warning the reader, don't let the devils make you do it, he is issuing a practical, urgent directive.
He is saying, do not let the Twitter algorithm make you hate your neighbor.
Do not let the 24-hour news cycle dictate your resting heart rate.
Do not let a politician convince you that half your country is evil just so they can win an election.
He is asking the reader to be profoundly brave because it takes courage to step out of the mob.
It takes courage to have the good sense to see beyond the immediate intoxicating rush of outrage, to see the machinery operating behind the curtain before it entirely consumes our ability to connect.
And what I find so incredibly charming and deeply grounding is the way he ultimately lands the plane. After all this heavy, sweeping analysis of societal erosion and media manipulation, he drops in his personal vision for his own future.
Right. He says he is very much looking forward to retiring in beach towns all over Europe.
He declares simply, "I'm always pro-beach."
It is the perfect humanizing contrast to the heavy machinery of the dividing rods. It's a return to the naturalism he championed in his romantic life.
The pro-beach mentality, I love it so much. Because it's not just about a geographic location, it is a psychological state of mind.
Being pro-beach is the ultimate rejection of the noise.
It is the commitment to finding your peace and protecting it fiercely. So I want to use this as a question for you, the listener. What is your beach?
What is that peaceful place, that hobby, that state of mind, or that specific relationship the constant screaming noise of the media and the mobs is distracting you from?
Are you sacrificing your beach to fight a digital war that someone else started on your timeline? Are you letting the devil steal your vacation?
If we pull all the way back and synthesize everything we've unpacked today, from the whimsical artist who understands AI, to the rejection of the shred and X promotion, to the dismantling of the societal dividing rods,
a very clear, unified grand narrative emerges.
Bernansky's central thesis is that peace is not a passive state of being. You do not just stumble into peace in the modern world.
No, peace is a daily, active choice. It requires work. It requires defense.
It requires actively, consciously rejecting the absolutes forced upon you by others. It's the choice to smile at the memory of a flawed ex-partner, keeping the lessons of love, instead of tearing up their photo for a cheap thrill at a bar.
It is the choice to smile at a stranger in the grocery store who might be wearing a political hat you disagree with, instead of viewing them as an existential enemy to your survival.
It is the deep, abiding recognition that the lines drawn between us are often illusions, designed by architects of division who want to control us.
So we leave you today with a call to action. We want you to take a hard, honest look at your walled garden. Evaluate the lines of division that currently exist in your own life.
Who actually drew those lines?
Right. Are they your lines based on your own authentic experiences, boundaries, and values? Or did a marketer, an outrage algorithm, or a political pundit draw them for you while you weren't looking?
It is a vital, necessary audit of your own mental and emotional real estate. You have to evict the squatters who are profiting off your anger.
You absolutely do. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over, something to carry with you as you log off, put your phone down, and step back into the real physical world.
What's the thought?
Well, we've seen how the system's all around us. From local bars offering discounts for spite to global media networks raking in billions from our political outrage, literally monetize our division.
Right. Their business model relies entirely on us being angry and separated.
So is the most rebellious, anti-establishment punk rock thing you can possibly do today simply choosing to be wildly, unapologetically grateful for the complex, flawed people in your life?
It completely starves the machine. It changes the entire paradigm.
It takes away all their power. Reject the friction. Cultivate your garden. Protect your peace.
We'll see you next time.